And so that that was kind of the impetus. Once we started to have the bones of some ideas of the work that Income Movement wanted to do, we started to reach out to other organizations. So we've had conversations with Humanity Forward leadership, we've had conversations with HFM, and we've had conversations with Humanity Fund for Humanity, which Giselle, who's on the call, is a part of. We invited HF and Fund for Humanity leadership to this because they've already committed to being a partner in a lot of these efforts. And so just again, to continue that collaboration and transparent communication, we thought it would be good for us to bring everybody together in this call. So that's kind of the idea behind it. And I think we certainly have a deck that we can share with you guys that is the output so far of these conversations, both internally at Income Movement, and then the integration of some of what has come out of the additional conversations. But I would really, I think because we're for some of us, I think most of you actually we've worked with, or I've worked with in one capacity or another, but a few of you we haven't. Maybe we can go around and just say where we're from, what kind of region or state we're representing, and then I think it would be good for us to start actually talking about where states are at and the things that you guys are most excited about or putting most of your energy towards right now, to start there. And then we can maybe for the second half spend some time on some of the things that we've pulled together and see where there's overlap and or things that you guys maybe want to partner with us on. Does that sound like a good general plan? Okay, cool. So I'm Stacy and I'll start with the introductions. I'm co-founder of Income Movement. We were established in September of last year, and have just been working on a variety of efforts at the grassroots level, political level, and also starting to build kind of coalitions both within the basic income community like this, but also starting to work on building partnerships with organizations that are working on social and racial justice, because we know that economic justice is such an important component to that. So we've been putting a lot of energy into that as well. And then maybe we just do a popcorn where we hand it off to the next person to introduce themselves. Kiara, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Stacy. My name is Kiara. I represent Tennessee, Nashville specifically, and that's Middle Tennessee. Ian is the other state leader. Ian is in Knoxville, which is East Tennessee. I would say that in terms of the state activity, obviously the majority of the volunteers that are activated are currently involved with Blair Walsingham's campaign in Congressional District 1 for the U.S. House of Representatives. But Ian and I did have a conversation about this a couple of days ago, and his take on it was that COVID has gotten people down, and there are still a lot of people in Tennessee that haven't been engaged in general. He says that he's probably biased because he has a lot to do, like being the campaign manager for Blair and everything, that it might be best as a result to form something more structured after November 3rd. But he also said that maybe people are looking for a way to get engaged, given that they are cooped up in their homes. And if Texas is an example, Tennessee could be cooped up for a little while longer. And that's pretty much where the conversation ended on that. I personally think that it's still really useful to be a part of these conversations, and I think that it might be interesting to see if some of these efforts that you guys are putting forth here might drive up interest here in Tennessee.
Cool. Elaine, you want to go?
Yes, hi everyone, good morning. My name is Elaine Way. I'm here representing California, mainly the SoCal region. What was the rest of the stuff? I was gonna say I'm working with the David Kim campaign in a volunteer basis. I'm part of this California leadership where we're focused on org structure, org development, obviously partnership with Income Movement and others. So we're really looking forward to sort of like building with you and also doing a lot more outreach, because I think that during this time of, you know, pandemic and general election and like all this other craziness, we have a whole host of issues that has really been at the forefront of people's mind, whether it's labor, right, public health, civic engagement. And so I think that one of the things we might want to push as a pet project that me and Kimberly talked about last night, which is voter registration. So this might be something that we'll take on because it's something that we can accomplish, right? And I think it all kind of like goes across all issues where, like, if we want people to feel like they are part of the change, that might be one way. Yeah, thank you.
Kimberly, do you want to go? I'm just going to go kind of clockwise on what's on my screen.
Hi, everyone. I'm down here in San Diego. Nice to meet you all. I'm Kimberly Woods, and I've got my Income Movement hat on right now. So really excited to get everyone involved and get going on all these projects. We've got big load, and let's share it and work together. I'm excited.
Yay.
Yenny, Yenny's having a conversation. Heather, do you want to go?
Sure. Hi, I'm Heather. I'm in Washington State. As far as involvement at the state level at this point, I've hosted the regional hang, and I did inquire about like any activities and things like that being done at this time, but it seems like we're still pretty much in infancy as far as anything really organized goes. But I'm interested and excited to see what could perhaps start to materialize.
Awesome. Thanks. How about you, Lehman?
Yeah, hey. I'm here in Atlanta representing Georgia. I think I'm the only one from Georgia on the call. So yeah, now that our primary is done, we're shifting focus to like small, low commitment projects to kind of get our network out. We started an email, like a weekly email, and the next thing we have coming up is on July 9th, we're setting up in a park with signs and having people come and donate food for a food bank that I have donated to. So yeah, just kind of like getting people out because I think everyone's cooped up. And yes, and I've also been inspired by other states, I think Massachusetts, who got ranked choice voting on their ballot and partnered with local organizations there. So we may be looking to do that soon.
It was Fair Vote chapter.
Right. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Yenny, do you want to?
Sure. So I'm Yenny. I'm in Central Massachusetts, in Worcester. I am wearing the HFM interim board hat most of the time. I haven't really been in touch on the Massachusetts end very well. But hopefully this week, I'm going to be pivoting a little bit more to local action, helping Worcester not fail atrociously at getting people to go to McGovern's house for the July 11th action. And trying to kind of just push that out to the whole HFM network, get that planned. I would really, really like to see something big happen in MAO1. So I'm trying to do contact with Alex Morse's campaign to see if they want to help coordinate something out there. Because he's the one that's holding up all of it. So yeah, I'm hoping to switch from internal focus stuff to external by midweek. Yeah.
Nice. Michael?
Yeah, I'm Michael McVicker. I'm representing Kentucky. And mostly candidate-wise, we're just waiting for the results of this race because Charles Booker hopefully wins. So maybe after that, we're trying to figure out how to grow a little bit more in the state because not a lot of people are reactivating like we wish they would. And then since other than, nobody would wanted to come to the meeting, but everyone bugged me, learn about how to host a march. So that's what we're excited to learn about.
That's great. We endorsed Booker, and we have pretty strong relationships with their campaign, but also Sunrise Movement that was pretty integral to to a lot of the efforts around their campaign in Kentucky specifically. So there might be an opportunity for us to make some introductions between you guys and Sunrise Movement that's there to coordinate some of the efforts that might come down the pipeline for Booker if he wins. Hopefully he wins. We all have our fingers crossed for sure. Giselle, do you want to introduce yourself? You're on mute.
I'm Giselle Huff, the president and founder of the Gerald Huff Fund for Humanity. Gerald was a very early supporter of Andrews and pulled me into the whole gang thing in February of 2018. And I've been, so I'm a nonprofit, so I can't do any political stuff. But Stacy and I worked on the march in New York and in San Francisco and worldwide. And those are the kind of things that I can do. My view of this, which is a 30,000 foot, sort of objective view, other than the passion I bring to it, is that we need something that ties everything together, even in this interim period when we're working very hard, when you are working very hard on the political aspect of things. I think that the gang and the people in the gang world are thirsting for a sort of a stake in the ground that begins the process of building chapters and what it takes to get things done over a period of time. Especially with 2024 in mind, you're going to need a lot of work to be done to mobilize people around the Andrew's ideas and the strength of his potential, whatever political future he has for himself. So one of the things that came out from the beginning of this conversation that I can't remember who mentioned it, but the idea of doing voter registration. That is something that every chapter, and I put those in air quotes, can do with great visibility, which is both political but not political, and is something that I can't imagine any particular geography would not be willing to do. It would give people something to rally around in this interim period until the movement gets organized.
Awesome, thanks, Giselle. Chelsea.
Hi everyone, I'm Chelsea. I am wearing a math hat in my photo, but I wear mostly a income movement hat. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and did a lot of kind of organizing there for the state, but since the campaign suspended, I have narrowed into UBI and trying to kind of help connect the larger UBI community with our Yang Gang and just build bridges and work towards UBI. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Keith, how about you?
Hey everyone, good to be here. Most of my effort recently has been on phone banking I'm in Massachusetts. yeah, phone banking for 2 Humanity Forward endorsed candidates in Massachusetts, Alex Morris and Dr. Robbie Goldstein. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Tom?
Hello, everybody. I'm calling in from South Carolina, but if we're if we're all talking about the different hats we're wearing, the one that I've got on today is a rapid response team hat focused on congressional pressure, which is where we are coming in. The big focus that we have right now is how do we leverage the larger platform that Humanity Forward and Andrew Yang currently has to try and mobilize towards these kinds of events. It's kind of an all hands on deck. How do we get those, I think, stake in the ground kind of events was the term just used. What do we do to get people very active so that they can consistently start to build throughout their region? So that's where we're coming in, trying to lend that that support and see this whole thing really start to move. So excited as ever.
Great. Liz?
Morning, everyone. My name is Liz. I also live in Portland. I am a volunteer with Income Movement, here to help support you and what you need in your volunteer role. So I'm also excited to be here.
Cool. And Catherine?
So I'm operating on a couple of levels. So in Massachusetts, as others have mentioned, we're doing ranked choice voting just got on the ballot. So there's going to be the campaign that's going to open up to, get the voters to vote for it. Plus there's a second track where there are bills in the legislature. So really awesome, well-coordinated campaign by Voter Choice Massachusetts, which is connected to Fair Vote. And then Melissa Lynn, our state lead, has been doing this great process of sending out candidate questionnaires, kind of pinging the candidates about UBI and democracy reforms and inviting them into a conversation about it. And so Robbie Goldstein, Alex Morris, and some of the folks that are in Mass 4 that, as Joe Kennedy kind of steps up to primary marquee, are kind of scrumming for his spot. So that's kind of in progress. And we just had a meeting to try to reactivate more leadership, because we certainly have more things that we could be doing if we could reactivate more people. So that was really nice, where 2 more people stepped up, and then we made a list of additional people who had been awesome to kind of one-on-one personally reach out to them and just develop that bigger leadership team that will allow us to do more stuff on a state level. And at the national level, I'm also on the HFM interim board, and my focus is in with the kind of regional state organizing. Part of that, like inviting everyone into this conversation here, but just doing the infrastructure stuff for us to be successful across all the states and support whatever the states want to do. So getting kind of just being part of the things, trying to shepherd our website, have our website linked to the state HFM chapters directly. Travis and Kim are kind of shepherding the CRM process to kind of collect all of our membership together. Yenny's working on getting our legal structure set up so that we can have like clear relationships with all the state chapters and whatnot. So, and then just sharing best practices. I'd say I was very excited by our last regional organizing meeting, because we had maybe about 5 or 6 states there, and each was sharing what they were doing. Massachusetts was sharing like their template materials for contacting candidates. Texas was talking about their successful efforts to get UBI and ranked choice voting on the Texas Democratic Party platform. And so it's just nice to see that states are kind of bringing these resources in, like, here's our materials, you can reuse them. Infrastructure wise, we have it set up where we can help states get their MailChimp and MailerLite emails verified so that their newsletters go into the inbox, versus in kind of more spammy type folders. So you get more readership. We have like stand-up websites where we can offer people like their state abbreviations.hfmovement.org. I don't know. I'm kind of going into the weeds, but it's just a real focus on like providing that infrastructure and that kind of trying to build that two-way communication. Like this state, I think like California had a really nice forum with Fair Vote and other voting organizations, and kind of helping the states that are different places doing different things share the materials so we can all benefit from the good work everyone's doing. I'll stop there.
Awesome. So for those who have joined in the last couple of minutes, we were just doing a round robin of introductions, just briefly talking about if you were representing a state, what state, and any current activity or actions that you guys are working on there, so that we can make sure we're integrating that into the larger conversation as we start to share some things that Income Movement has pulled together. So I think looking at this, Massey, Claire, I think are those who joined. Massey, do you want to do a brief introduction?
Hey guys, I'm Massey. Background in engineering and tech startups and such. And always interested in politics, but really decided to dive in and sort of look what I can do to best help out. And HFM seemed to be really awesome places, getting a lot of work done. So I'm on the interim board. And my sort of big focus is help building structure and processes to streamline and improve our efficiency, sort of best practices and what works out of the industry, as well as an upcoming action with the Movement for a People's Party org. And Stacey's well aware of that. She's been an awesome champion with that as well. And I'm helping getting a Houston event organized, as well as an Austin event targeting both the senators from the state of Texas.
Excellent. Claire? You want to go ahead, Claire, and introduce yourself real quickly?
I'm muted. Maybe she's not there.
Oh, no problem. Looks like her browser's not. If you want to just write in what state you're with, and if there's anything that's happening, we can go ahead and move into the next piece. But as that pops up, we'll bring it to the surface so that it's part of the recording. Ooh, Malaysia. All right. That's awesome. Okay, cool. And it looks like policy is a big part of what you're putting your energy into. Cool, thanks, Catherine. So Catherine invited her so that she could kind of be a fly on the wall and learn more about where we're at. So welcome, Claire. Thank you for coming. Okay, so this was really cool. As everybody was sharing what's happening in their states, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 states, it looks like, and well, actually 8 because Oregon. 8 states represented here in this conversation, which is phenomenal. And it sounds like, there's a pretty wide range, but there's a lot, if there's candidates, UBI candidates, and still primaries, or candidates who moved on to the general, there's work happening in candidates. There's some smaller efforts to engage, like in Georgia, in Atlanta, for food bank donations, and then there's also some efforts happening for the July 11th action, and how to continue to do the congressional pressure campaigns that we have going. And I think, those are really great. There's also some of the things that people talked about: voter registration opportunities, as well as best practices, helping bring organizations together and share best practices, tools, assets as we move forward. It's great to hear that you guys are already doing so much in that space. For sure, it's something that's on our own roadmap as well. And so looking forward to continuing that work that you guys have already spearheaded, and seeing if we can get an even wider and wider net cast with other organizations to help with that kind of collaboration and ultimately support. Because it's amazing when somebody hands you even just the framework of a spreadsheet of how to track something, like when you don't have to do that and you can just dive right into the work. It's just really, really wonderful. So even those kinds of simple sharings of tools can sometimes be what gets us where we need to go. So we'll talk a little bit about the July 11th action in a minute, and a little bit more details around that. Any other thoughts or questions that you guys want to ask before? I'm going to share my screen that kind of goes over some of the things that we've started to outline, that Income Movement has kind of pulled together, but I want to make sure if there's other topics that we want to make sure we cover, that we do. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Obviously, once I share my screen, it's a little bit harder for me to track chat, but if somebody can just, if you want to use the hand up tool, if you have that on your toolbar for this, that'll help me know if you have something that you want to add or a question. Ideally, this is a conversation, so I'm going to talk some, but I would really love it if you guys felt comfortable to interrupt as we're going through, so that we can dive deeper into things that are important to you guys. Okay, so let me share my screen. This document is the latest kind of summary based on the conversations that we've been having, both the internal, like I said at the beginning, that mid-year retreat that we had with our internal team. And then we've subsequently added some things here based on conversations we've had with other organizations and other kind of leaders in the space. So, so even, I know that some of you have seen this already, you'll see that there are some additions based on some of the conversations we had. So, so just this slide is a large overview, high-level overview, to help understand what, from our perspective, the pillars are to a movement that we are working on, and that we kind of build all our entire roadmaps around. So we have a 2020 roadmap, we have a 2022 roadmap, and then a 2024 roadmap. So, so thinking about, you know, obviously the one for this year gets very detailed, and you'll see some of that. But in our mind, we need to be, you know, thinking about what are the key milestones and goals in each election cycle, towards getting to the large goal, which is getting a majority in Congress that supports UBI to get a federal UBI passed. And so the three pillars are here on the left that we just, in our experience, and also just, you know, looking at history and what has been most effective for movements, and moving from kind of a social movement into getting political, having a real deep political impact and getting laws passed that support that social movement. We've identified the grassroots side as being obviously very critical. The thought leadership piece, which is, you know, the coordination across organizations, influencers, thinking about things like content and information, tools and resources, but also language, and, you know, how are we collectively having conversations about the topic of UBI so that there's consistency there? How are we making sure that what's getting produced out of academia or out of pilots or out of grassroots efforts all has some of the same language around it, so that media and the political establishment start to recognize that there's a movement happening, and it's a coordinated movement, that this isn't just a bunch of kind of siloed independent organizations or groups doing work, but that, that there really is something significant happening. That really does have this goal towards the political impact. And then we have the political impact, and this is generally, from our perspective, about really three things: establishing UBI as a political movement and this kind of transition point that we find ourselves in. How do we move, most of the attention around UBI has come from a single candidate, certainly in the last, 18 months, and that's Andrew Yang. How do we move the grassroots community towards thinking about a movement and what it means to be facilitating and driving a movement versus just focusing on a single candidate in a single race? But also thinking about, like I said earlier, the media and the political establishment and their understanding and interpretation of what's happening, and helping bring them into this new way of thinking. And then we have congressional candidate support, and then we have legislation. And there's a lot of organizations that are already doing amazing work in legislation. So we are less focused on that. Economic Security Project has certainly been deep in the legislation and the pilot space for a long time, has done amazing work in that space, and has really deep relationships, strong relationships on the Hill. They're the ones who wrote Emergency Money to the People that Representative Ryan and Khanna, as well as Senators Booker and others, supported early on during COVID. So they were kind of poised and ready to hand emergency UBI legislation over to Congress people to start moving quickly on those efforts. So what you see here are the three pillars, but then what you see to the right here for each of these is what came out of our 6-month, larger kind of initiative buckets that came out of our 6-month kind of mid-year retreat. And so these straddle a lot of the things that you guys have already been talking about, the work that you're doing. But I'll just at a high level go through these, and then we can maybe get a little bit deeper into the details of what this actually looks like, so that we can think about and really focus quite a bit on, in our mind, there's a lot here, and it can sometimes be a little overwhelming, like, holy crap, this is a lot. And it is. But we've also gone through and done some very strategic scheduling and around what this looks like and when we want to roll different efforts out to make it so that we're very targeted, and kind of each month or each kind of 2-month stint, we have only 3 or 4 things that we're really driving hard towards. So we'll probably focus a little bit more in this conversation on the July efforts, because those are things that actually are pretty pressing and that are rolling out first, and actually address a lot of the things, are kind of aligned with a lot of the things that you guys are already working on in different states. But this is the high level, and so just to give you that framework and understanding of the things that we have on our roadmap. So we've got the COVID action plan. This is the congressional pressure plan, kind of grassroots action that's at bailoutthepeople.com. This is something that we pulled together. We started this really as soon as the conversation came up around the first stimulus package, HEROES, and as soon as we heard that Congress was working towards a stimulus package, we immediately moved into a series of actions to get to pressure Congress to include ongoing payments as part of that stimulus. We've been working with Economic Security Project, which pulled together a war room that was basically an invitation of about 30 to 50 organizations that work on policy and lobbying on the Hill, on a range of issues, from like healthcare to education to housing. But that all of those organizations felt very strongly that ongoing payments to people during the crisis was absolutely critical. So we get together once a week and talk about what's happening on the Hill, and talk about ways to coordinate between lobbyists and policymakers who are having backdoor conversations with Congress members about ongoing payments to people, coordinating that effort with the grassroots effort to make sure that that candidates, that Congress members are basically getting it from all sides right now, so that whether it's social media or letters and calls from their constituents or conversations with lobbyists that they have relationships with, they're getting the same consistent conversation. And when we were really firing on all cylinders was during the early stage of the HEROES legislation, when we started to see a significant number of Congress members support ongoing payments to people. We had Representative Tlaib doing a letter and having 85 members of Congress sign that they would support ongoing payments to people. It's when we had Speaker Pelosi talk about maybe it's time to think about a guaranteed income. So we've definitely seen some really great movement when we are coordinating across these different efforts. So that's what that's about. And July, we just heard in the last few days that July, there is going to be another big push in July to try to get a second and final stimulus package passed. And so what we've also found is that the first 10 days of that discussion is when we can fight and when we have an opportunity to try to make sure that ongoing payments is on the table for the stimulus. So immediately following July 4th weekend, we're going to be moving into a pretty steep set of actions over the course of 10 days to 2 weeks to really try to get Congress to make sure there's enough people in Congress that are willing to go to bat for ongoing payments, fight hard for it, that we can keep it on the table as they move the legislation through both the House and the Senate. And we're focusing right now on the Senate because we know the Senate is where everything is getting stalled. They've had stimulus legislation on their sitting there for them to vote on for 6 or 8 weeks, and McConnell has ordered all of the conservative senators to not even engage in conversations with anybody on the other side of the aisle related to stimulus, and to not take a stance one way or the other, period, to just ignore the whole thing. So we're putting some real energy into the Senate right now because that seems to be the most critical piece. And we can go into a little bit more detail. The July 11th event that's coming up is part of the COVID action plan, this pressuring Congress. And on the next slide, we have a little bit more details on all of the actions that we want to spearhead for that. And the July 11th is one of them. We also have, through the end of 2020, another big effort is the Basic Income March. This is, Giselle mentioned that we worked together last year. Last year we had 30 cities across the globe participate. We are anticipating having a larger, an even larger and broader participation across the globe this year. And so happy to, happy to start talking a little bit more and go into some detail about this. This is certainly something we're kicking off now because the events have a lot of moving parts to them. And so the earlier that we can get started on really hammering out the details, the better. So we'll spend a little more time, deeper time talking about this in a moment too. Volunteer operations and support, a lot of this is internal to Income Movement, but I think the things that you guys have been talking about related to sharing best practices is a piece of this. So the kind of supporting operations, supporting like volunteer efforts and events and activities and all of that with the larger community of organizations is really key. And then on the thought leadership side, there's a little bit less here from a tactical volunteer engagement piece, but we think when it comes to organizations and organization leadership coming together, there's some important things here. The first is a Social Justice Alliance. I talked a little bit about this. We've partnered with Poor People's Campaign as well as the Justice Collaborative. We're working to build relationships with Movement for Black Lives and some other organizations that are working on racial justice and social justice. And ultimately, this is about building really strong coalitions all of these organizations, including Movement for Black Lives, Poor People's Campaign, and the Justice Collaborative, have all publicly supported and added to their roadmap guaranteed income. And so we know that we're already aligned with these organizations, and they're just doing such important work and have a wealth of experience to be able to help us as we start to build kind of our larger coalitions. The Basic Income Coalition is basically what we're doing right now. This is bringing together basic income leadership to do the things that I talked about at the beginning of this call, really just making sure that there's as much open and direct communication happening across all of the organizations, so we're all clued into the efforts and work that's happening, so that we're limiting redundancies, being more efficient and effective with volunteer hours and budget, and ultimately just finding those opportunities for us to do deeper partnership, so that we can kind of, what are those key moments where everybody needs to come together and put all of our energy behind something to help signal to the larger nation, to the globe, or to leadership, like our political leadership, that there's something happening right now around basic income and they need to start paying attention. The UBI Content Asset Library piece is really about trying to find a way to share all the amazing work and information that's out there, beyond articles, but getting into ideas, assets, learn, information about specific organizations, so people can start to understand like what organizations are working on what efforts, to know who to volunteer for or where to plug in, all of those kinds of things. And making it an organization agnostic tool. Right now, there's a lot happening in this space, but it's usually happening in Slacks or on Google Drives. You have to ask for, you have to be invited or have links to, you have to be kind of vetted or given permissions to be able to be part of those communities. And so that leads to more siloing from the perspective of growing a movement. Those are important tools for organizations, for sure, and the kinds of conversations that are happening around like what are our efforts and how are we doing that. But when it comes to a larger movement, the ability for people who are just kind of UBI curious to come around and see what's going on in the community, kind of lurk, see more, and then decide that they want to get engaged and involved once they feel like they've kind of reached that point of understanding, is, we think, an important component. So we're working on potentially an online forum that has some of these capabilities where people can engage in conversations, but also can access tools, articles, assets, and learn more about what's happening in the community without having to be necessarily part of any one specific organization. And then the political impact is pretty critical. Certainly in 2020, we find that this is our moment to do some of what we were talking about earlier, of the shift from single candidate support to building the movement and having the impact that we need. So Income Movement is in the process of working on a Yang Gang census report. When Andrew first ended his campaign, we hosted a Yang Gang census to understand more about the people who were supporting him, really in a very just straightforward data-driven way. Who are they? What are their demographics? How much time and energy and money were they giving to the campaign? What do they think is most important from Andrew's policies that they want to make sure move forward and they put their energy into? Those kinds of things. So on the 8th of July, we've targeted a launch of that, and this is going towards this idea of establishing UBI and the UBI community as a political movement, as a group of people who have political capital, that are highly engaged and involved, and ultimately are the ones who are going to be showing up and voting, and ultimately can help candidates win elections. So that's the first piece. We're going to be looking at the primary voter results from all the states that have had UBI candidates running and pull together some analysis around that. Obviously, Kentucky is one of the states that's had a significant support for UBI candidates in that Senate race, but California and some other states also have had, just through these primaries, New York have had a lot of UBI candidates running, and we can start to really look at that data and help establish the role that the UBI community is playing in elections right now. We also are going to have do some pressure on Biden and the DNC to take a public stance on UBI at the 2020 convention. So thinking about forms of protest, pressure campaigns, specifically for the DNC and Biden as we roll into July and August will be important. We do anticipate that voter registration at a lot of these public events are an opportunity, as well as any public events that are associated with the Basic Income March or the COVID Action Plan, are opportunities to continue to establish ourselves as a community that brings voters to the polls, and that is about ensuring every vote counts and those kinds of things. So, and great to hear that so many of you guys are already thinking about this and that this is a priority. And then the last is the congressional candidate support. We have kind of two pieces here. The supporting existing UBI candidates is certainly one of them, but for us, we think one of the programs that we want to get up and running this year that could actually significantly impact and kind of compress the timeline for getting a majority in Congress to support UBI is finding candidates in general elections who already align with the desire for economic justice and kind of economic reform in our country. Find those people who are already aligned with some of the goals that we have. Find the ones who are in very close races and actually start to influence them to adopt UBI with this idea that they may actually get the additional 2 or 3 points that they need on election day to be able to win the race if they support UBI. And that's why so much of the establishing UBI as a political movement work that we're doing in July and August is so critical, because we want to make sure that when we start reaching out after the conventions to candidates who don't currently support officially adopt UBI, we want to be able to bring all of that data to them for them to start to understand why they might want to reconsider and add UBI to their platform and to their kind of policy plan. If we can do that and be effective in getting even just a couple of candidates to add to their campaign, that's a really important set of learnings that we can take into 2022 and the plans that we want to have for influencing really in some ways sitting Congress members, as well as leading candidates in 2022 to adopt it. So that's everything at a very high level. But I want to, before we go too deep, I'd love to just understand, I haven't had a chance to watch what's happening on chat, but what kinds of observations, thoughts is everybody having on this?
I had a question for you. So the July actions, I guess, what is the form that's going to take in terms of social distancing? I understand it's like delivering these letters publicly to the Congress folk, but just curious how you guys are thinking of structuring that.
Yeah, so maybe I'll go to the next slide, just because the next slide is the COVID action plan, and what you're talking about is on there, so we can go a little bit deeper into that. So the July 11th, just as a kind of level set about kind of what this is, the July 11th event is was really kind of brought onto the radar of the basic income community by Yenny and some of the relationships that she'd built in the Movement for People's Party. which is essentially a output from the Bernie's 2016 race, presidential campaign. There was, you know, like Our Revolution was one piece that came out of that, but pretty quickly following that, the Movement for People's Party came out as well. And so they are working on, they basically have established a set of 6 demands that range from defunding police, and this is specifically like to address the current crisis that we find ourselves in. So it's very much so kind of focused on the COVID economic side of things, as well as the uprising. So they have a list of demands: defunding police, $2,000 a month to individuals for the duration of the crisis, and then things like a halt on rent and mortgage payments, and a few other things. I think there's some stuff in there about frontline workers and supporting those people as well. And so their plan is to deliver those demands to the homes of senators and representatives on July 11th. This is something that the Booker campaign and really the Sunrise Movement in Kentucky, in coordination with the Booker campaign, did for Mitch, specifically around defunding police, I believe was the primary topic. And they all basically showed up at the crack of dawn at Mitch McConnell's house in Kentucky, with a group of hundreds of people demanding that he take action. And so that's the plan, that's the idea at a high level. I think it's a couple of things are important about this. One, from our perspective, at least at Income Movement, and HFM and HF can certainly speak up for themselves, for their own organizations, about how they what their approach is. But Income Movement's approach is, this is a Movement for People's Party event. So for the most part, we're kind of taking their lead on these. What they've said is that there's, depending on what the hosts want to do, what they think is right based on what's happening in their community, this can take the form of a physical march, or it can be a car parade. That the delivery, the mechanism for getting attention should adhere to whatever it is that the hosts feel like is the right format. So that's the first piece. To a large extent, because we have certainly partnered with MPP, but we also want to think about ourselves as really supporting mechanisms. So certainly, if one of the things that we've done in our partnership with Economic Security Project and the War Room effort, those kind of lobbyists and policy people that we talked about earlier, that are having the conversations with Congress members, we've basically targeted 11 Congress members, specifically senators, that we want to make sure in early July that we go after, that we influence, and that we're kind of choosing from 2 sides of the spectrum. One is progressives who are already pretty aligned with this, or have supported some kind of other something related to ongoing payments, and we're asking them specifically to support the Harris-Markey-Sanders bill, the $2,000 a month bill. So that's like the lowest hanging fruit. How can we get some people to that are pretty much so aligned with this philosophically, to publicly come out and endorse and support it, but also go to bat when it comes time to fight for it? And then we also want to be influencing and targeting members on the conservative side of the GOP who have done some form of signaling that they may be amenable to this. And so we have those 4 senators targeted as well. And that makes a total of 11. So for us, this July 11th event is, obviously, if there's an event happening in anybody's communities and they want to be a part of it, we will be promoting and pushing that. From Income Movement's perspective, we're going to be looking very closely at those 11 senators and make sure that those senators, there's events happening for those senators. And if there isn't, then trying to find somebody in the basic income community who will host that. they're setting up on Action Network. They use Action Network like we do. They're setting up a map view where you can see like where all the events are. You can sign up, register to participate, or if there isn't one in your region, you can sign up to host. So that's supposed to be live tomorrow, and will be part of kind of a rollout of sharing and social media. We'll be sending out that information to our email list, and have a social media campaign scheduled for rolling that out within our community. And we'll be working with Humanity for Yang and Humanity Forward and you guys to figure out how we can kind of promote that within our communities. But I think that for us, I think we want to promote it, share it, make sure everybody knows about it, and then people can make their decisions about if they want to engage specifically in the event itself, based on what the action is that's been designed, and if it aligns with, all the organizers are going to have masks and gloves and hand sanitizer, and are going to be working to keep people spread out and keep at that 6 to 10 foot radius. And those kinds of things. They're very dedicated to the nonviolent protest and being very kind of demanding things, but being very kind of coordinated and thoughtful through the process. So I think those basic measures are in place, but we're also, for us, an important part of this are the other components of this COVID action plan that you see here. We have letter writing campaigns and petitions, and we're kicking off a letter to the editor writing campaigns, human story opportunities for people to tell their stories in each state of what it is why they need additional support, or why they think that that Congress members and senators should be supporting this. What we want to do is bring all of those together and distribute them to the hosts of each of these events so that they can print all of that stuff off, and that can be part of what they deliver as well. So it's not only just a list of demands, but it's actually a list of stories and letters that they've received from their constituents specifically about the need for them to support these things. And I think that's a way that people could get really deeply involved in this if they don't want to do the in-person event, but can still actually be part of that event. That was very long-winded, but does that help kind of level set a little bit that piece?
No, I have a question, if I may.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out, just as I mentioned earlier, about the effort to register people.
Yeah.
That's a specific action.
Yes.
And what I want to understand from this group, because this is my first exposure to you guys, is what would be the objection to taking on one of, like, for instance, the July 11th? You have 11 senators that you've identified. You can make that list available. And the people on this call whose constituencies fall within those 11 senators' purview could, like tomorrow, start mobilizing some of the people in their networks to participate in this. This is like my view of something that could happen. I need to understand what the barriers are to that.
Okay.
I mean, why wouldn't it happen?
I think that's a good question, and it's worth noting that in our organizing, just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying or add a little bit to it, Giselle, in our conversations with MPP, there is a whole effort associated with this for voter registration. So there's an arm of MPP who's specifically kind of building that and wanting to make sure that gets added to any of the events where there's enough organizers that can actually help make that happen, as well as make it a safe event and all of the other things. So
when you say that, Stacey, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
when you say that, do you mean definitively there are people whose names are assigned to this, whose job it is to make it happen? I mean, these are words. I want to understand what the actions are like. Is Joe Smith in charge of Kentucky getting people to all of the events in Kentucky, farmers markets, whatever, to register voters? Is there such a plan in effect? Because just to say these things doesn't make them happen.
Sure.
And you know, this is, I'm coming at this from a completely outside point of view. One person sitting in our office all day long, absolutely not connected in any way, but I'm constantly trying to figure out how does all of this translate into actual actions. And in my experience, nothing happens if it isn't somebody's job.
And
if someone isn't held responsible for making it happen.
Yeah, and Income Movement's perspective on this is, and I think this is a great conversation to have with the state leaders here, is one is integrating this into existing events that we have going, knowing that like for the Basic Income March, definitely on all of our flagship marches, having a team that's specifically in charge of voter registration is in the plan. There's going to be members who are specifically owning that. Just like somebody who's going to be owning, like leading the event and making sure everybody's safe and is, covering first aid, and people who are going to be working together to get speakers and stuff like that. That'll be one of the very specific target teams. But I think that and Catherine, I see your hand is raised. I think that on the state side in particular, I think that's an interesting conversation to have around an ongoing effort that people are engaged in to increase voter registration and turnout for 2020, because we know that it's so critical. So Catherine first and then Massey.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I see just by being involved in my local Democratic Party city, like town, is that the Democratic Party is leading this big efforts to do voter registration. And like, apart from that, like I know some of the kind of state groups that are supporting specific candidates have been doing voter registration. But like personally, the way I think about it is, what isn't going to get done. Like, I feel like there's going to be this big push on the Democratic side, especially to get a ton of people registered to vote. But I feel like what Income Movement, this whole alliance is focused on is the pressure campaign to get Congress specifically to focus on emergency direct cash payments because of the eviction wave that's coming, the foreclosure wave that's coming. Like in Massachusetts, something like last time I looked, it was like 1 in 6 people is on unemployment. All the states, because of the way Congress chose to structure the aid, where they kind of put a little top up on unemployment, encourage more people to go on unemployment. So the state's resources are drained. I've like testified in like city council hearings, trying to get money put to certain like to support education and things like that. So there are drastic cuts that are happening everywhere. And so I just feel like there's other more well-resourced organizations that are very focused on voter registration, whereas like we have this opportunity to like spearhead this conversation about an emergency UBI that could make a really big difference in terms of people's lives right now. So that's like my personal take on it. Like, I feel like our organizations are so small, like, and we're just developing, so we can't do all the things. So we have to like pick, but that's just my one opinion.
Yeah, Massey.
So, and to getting around the way to address some of Giselle's questions and a little bit of Catherine's, and to elaborate on the things you've said, Stacy, is that the way MPP has done it is that you can apply essentially to be a host, or just a person who's going to be attendee. And the idea is that especially for the big events, we get hosts for the list of senators that Stacy has outlined. We get hosts that trust, and we really make sure we go out and do those right. But also ideally, we get our state leads and chapter leads to be hosts in the cities that they can be. and we make sure that they have those things that they cover, and also reach out to local organizations who would be interested, such as BLM. I know in Texas, there's the Texas Organizing Project. There's a few other locally active organizations. Local members will likely know at least a bit of an intro to them. And these being aligned with much of the BLM conversations, there's 6 clear points that the demands. I think it won't be hard to get other groups to help organize this and make happen and do stuff such as voter registration. I agree that maybe as HFM and maybe Income Movement, that shouldn't be our number one priority. We're just making sure the coalition comes together. But if we do end up getting the resources and some, local organization wants to step up and put a point person to, registering and stuff like that, I think that's totally doable as long as we can get, local resources to help.
It has been a really important part. I know, Giselle, you aren't because of your 501c3 status, you're not involved in the candidate side, but it has been pretty inspiring, the amount of work, the Get Out the Vote coalition work that's happening with volunteer efforts that are working in candidate stuff. I know Kentucky there was a huge push for like 3 or 4 weeks leading up to the elections, where Booker's campaign, and I suspect also Breuer's and even Amy McGrath's, was working really hard with the Get Out the Vote community and chapters in Kentucky to make sure that work, that was a kind of an integral part of what was happening. And those volunteers are all coming at that from out of the UBI, or a big portion of those, for many of those candidates, are coming out of the UBI community and are having some of those conversations on the ground when they're registering people to vote about basic income, and they're wearing their, pro-UBI stuff. And so there's certainly an opportunity there for the basic income community to be showing up and helping kind of promote that the basic income community is integral and kind of integrated into the Get Out the Vote work.
So I'm totally in agreement with what Catherine was saying about, the limited number of resources and the emphasis where you have to, prioritizing your resources is probably number 1, 2, and 3 of what you have to do in order to be effective. And so I understand that, the voter registration thing is shared by many, many people, many organizations, and it's going on. And part of it is what you just said, Stacy. But the other part of what I was raising, which is the idea of finding these 11 people and putting all the geographic constituencies, bringing them to bear on those 11 people, that is pretty much what we're trying to do, right? The COVID action plan, trying to influence Congress to do something now about this.
Yep.
So that's one. There must be, there's 10 activities that could be done, and everybody has to evaluate what their resources are. That's a very important part of how you're going to proceed. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to get at something deeper, perhaps, and that's because I'm so ignorant about this, which is, if I put myself in the place of any one of these states, and I find out, as a Yang Gang member who was so devoted for the length of the campaign and so committed and went to Iowa, and if I'm in that position now and I'm looking at what we can do, what my organization can do, the people I know can do, I jump feet first into something like this. Here is, Senator Feinstein, and she's one of the targets, and I live in California, and so, here I go.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And we can share we have the list of candidates. I think this conversation with states is actually the opportunity for us. This is the conversation where we're starting to talk about, here's opportunities. How do we want to partner? How are people feeling about this? So I think what you're talking about is really kind of the main goal of this conversation. who can activate their base, who can commit to doing some work, who can, you know, and what can Income Movement and, you know, other organizations commit to doing to support the work that states are already doing also, so that we have that kind of coordinated effort. And so the, you know, I want to
We
move.
have Oregon.
And I want to move through this a little kind of briefly because I want to spend the last 10 minutes of this, and I want to also be very punctual on this and be respectful of people's time because it's a Sunday morning. But I also want to devote the last 8 to 10 minutes to talk about what people feel comfortable kind of either committing to or what a timeline for going back to your communities are. What out of this is most interesting that you guys want to be involved in. The COVID action plan is the primary thing, one of the primary things that we're focusing on in July. So that's one of those high priorities. Kicking off the basic income march is another. We have a website that is, and maybe if Chelsea or Kimberly, if you guys can drop into the chat, both the bailoutthepeople.com website and the Basic Income March website, that would be great. These are the two resources for each of these efforts. The COVID action plan, we have bailoutthepeople.com. That's all of the active actions that people can take, from letter writing to, you know, phone calls to things like car parades, etc., are there. So that's a really easy thing for that's getting updated regularly. We've got another push out happening tomorrow once we get the link to the July 11th map view and things like that. We can put on there, we can put, I just was writing this down as you were talking, Giselle. We'll also be putting this, the senators that we're targeting on there, so everybody just knows collectively and publicly kind of where we're at and what and how we want to push very hard towards that. So we can spend a little time at the end here just talking more about that. But the Basic Income March, what happened last year is I think we had about 22 cities in the United States participate, and those ranged from very small gatherings of of community members around, you know, some people had like picnics or had curbside protests where they just kind of filled a couple blocks of streets and held signs on the side of the road, to more dedicated kind of marches. This year we have a wide variety. If you go to the Basic Income March website and you go to the Get Involved page, you'll see that there's a variety of different kinds of activities that we're going to be helping support that are a range of kind of on the range of social distancing measures. So we do anticipate, especially with what's happening right now in so many states and this big uptick that we're seeing, we do anticipate that that we're going to need to rely more heavily on safe social distancing actions. And so we're dedicated to supporting those. And so this is an opportunity for you guys as you're thinking through this. What we have this week, we have 2 meetings, and I can drop those here. On Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, and on Thursday at the same time, 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern. We have volunteer, basically kind of their webinar events where we're gonna go through in detail some of these things. We're gonna look at project plans and timelines for July specifically, and we're going to give everybody who's participating a form to be able to tell us which events they're interested in being a part of, and start to actually get everybody into project task forces so that we can move forward on things. And the COVID action plan is a critical piece of that, and we'll have a breakdown of these different actions so they can say, oh, I'm really interested in being part of the letter to the editor campaign or what have you, or the July 11th event. And then the same with the Basic Income March. And then the second piece that we are really pushing hard is actually in the political side. This is the defining the movement, and this is as well as the support UBI candidates. So it's kind of these 2 top sections on the political impact side. We'll follow up this meeting with, I mean, we have all of our notes here, so so you guys, the notes document, but we'll follow up with that notes document and also this document, so you guys have this and you can look at it and you can share it with your state community. But for us, in our mind, the big call to action here out of this conversation is pushing and promoting the Tuesday and Thursday events this week to that anybody who's interested in doing anything in July, it's an opportunity to come together. Erica from Humanity Forward will be sharing some things and as well. So this isn't just going to be an income movement thing. We really want to make sure that the things that are most critical that are happening within the community are represented, opportunities specifically for volunteers to be engaged. So by the end of the meeting on Thursday, it's the same meeting Tuesday and Thursday. We're just offering it twice for people to fit into their schedules. At the end of the Thursday meeting, we anticipate having a clear answer from everybody who participated, which actions and which projects they're interested in being a part of, and starting to funnel those people directly into the project teams. And next week, the week of the 6th, is when we'll be actually kicking off all of those. Some things are kicking off this week, like the basic income march stuff. We're kicking off this week because it's so pressing. And obviously we've already been working on the July 11th project, but that's when we'll start to just funnel people deeply into the work of those that have been our new kind of volunteers to this work. So we have a lot of structure in place to be able to help support this. And from our perspective, two things that we want to have happen out of this is for you guys to make decisions as state kind of leadership. If you feel comfortable promoting the events this week to your teams, to your communities, to say, like, if you are interested in being part of any kind of volunteering out of Humanity Forward, Income Movement, Humanity First Movement, like, come to these meetings, one of these meetings, so that you can get plugged in. And then the second is to spend the last 5 minutes here understanding from you guys if there's anything missing that you want to make sure gets added to this for the larger conversation with the volunteer community. And then second, what you guys feel most excited about supporting or being in having your states be involved in, as just a quick gut check, knowing that you guys can bring this to your communities and we can get a more final kind of understanding once you've had those conversations. But I'd love to just go around and have everybody answer those two things. If you feel at this stage you can promote the Tuesday and Thursday meetings, and then what out of what we've talked about do you think is most interesting or exciting for your state to be involved in? I'm going to make this larger so that I can see all of you guys. So can we maybe just go around real quickly and maybe start with, we'll do it by state, and I know there's some representatives from multiple states, but let's just start with Tennessee and understand what's jumping out here for you that you think is interesting, and can you commit to getting some information out to your community?
Actually, the most specific thing that jumped out to me was, especially in regards to voter registration, there is an organization here in Nashville known as the Equity Alliance, and it mostly focuses on getting people of color registered to vote here in the Metro Nashville area, with focuses in other areas as well, and they have done a great job. Before the mayoral election last year here in Nashville, they were able to get 50,000 residents of Metro Nashville registered to vote, who are all people of color. And they have had some virtual volunteer onboarding meetings that people have been committing to recently. They've been ramping up their efforts. So I think that I'd like to get more involved with them specifically. I did go out to their Juneteenth block party celebration a week ago and saw that they were registering voters there alongside all of the festivities, and I sure think it would be valuable to establish a relationship with them and get more involved with their efforts. So I think that's something that I'd like to focus on specifically on top of potentially finding a way to communicate like all these initiatives that's going on here with Income Movement to the rest of the Yang Gang volunteer base in Tennessee to see if any of this appeals to people. And maybe they would be willing to take on some of these initiatives as well because they're not here. And it could be merely because they just don't know what they could get involved with, that they're not getting involved. So I would like to send out another email blast that was really effective for the Southeast Social that we had. So I think I'd like to do something like that as well. So that's pretty much where I'm at. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. And I think one thing that we can get to you guys end of day today is a one-pager with just an outline of the key initiatives over the next like 4 to 6 weeks, so that because there's a lot of stuff in here that might be feel a little overwhelming. It's like, where should I be focusing? That you guys could then send out to your communities. And so we'll make sure that that is part of what gets sent out today when we send out a reply all email that will have this deck. We'll also have a kind of volunteer one-pager. At the top will be the 2 events that we have planned this week that they can attend. And the links to those, so they can just anytime they want to do it, they don't have to register for it. And then also an overview of the key things that we'll be kicking off in that meeting, so that you just have the tools you need. Awesome. How about California? Kind of the commitment to sharing the opportunities with your community, and then what is jumping out from your perspective that you might emphasize or work on in your community.
I guess if I can speak to that, I guess I'll probably defer to the commitments to actions that were made during our last call, because I don't really know. So I'll probably defer to that, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Washington.
Well, I was sitting here thinking, well, I have some people I could try to do outreach to that may have other networking that I'm unaware of at this point, and I would be happy to do that. And I also am involved with the diversity inclusion group that Kiara was mentioning, and I definitely think we could have some great brainstorming ideas potentially with how to work through that.
Awesome.
Hey, Heather, we'll definitely be doing something for Merkley in Oregon, Portland. And so even being able to just like rally people to just show up and participate would be awesome. If like people aren't able to kind of like, you know, do some of the organizing and stuff like that, but just like will come on the day of to participate.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, we just have to find the right way to network down to specifically to people in the southern part of Washington, where it's much closer for them to get involved, you know, on the Oregon side than it is in the Washington, you know, up in the Seattle area. So definitely we should be working together in any kind of promotional efforts.
Awesome. I'll connect with you after.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Georgia, how about you? Anything jumping out, and do you have a feeling, do you have a good connection with your community where you could do some outreach?
Yeah. So, sorry guys. Bailoutthepeople.com is really on point. So I'll be sharing that tonight. Georgia has our weekly meetings on Sundays, so it'll be fresh on my mind. And the food drive actually hasn't been promoted in our newsletter yet, and it's scheduled for June 9th, but I'm thinking we'll just do it July 9th. So we'll just make it July 11th and have it an Income Movement event. Because actually our last event that we had before the lockdown happened was the Income Movement thing in early March. So that'll be appropriate. So I'm not sure how it will look yet, but yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And I actually had an interesting idea for like guerrilla marketing that I'm still working out in my head, but yeah.
Well, definitely reach out directly to us when you, as you know, once you have a sense of the food bank stuff, because we would love to. I think we have like over 1,500 people on our membership list in Georgia, and so we can also just help promote that as we lead into it, just very targeted with people in your region to let them know it's happening, to make sure that they bring food to the event and stuff like that. So so let's stay in touch.
Okay, for sure. Awesome.
Massachusetts.
I say there's 3 of us here. So Keith, do you want to go first, and then Yenny and I can go?
Sure. Yeah, I can help try to get the word out in Massachusetts. Although, yeah, like Yenny and Catherine and Melissa might be able to like have more reach in terms of like the email list and whatnot. The thing that interests me most, I would say, is the content library. I think that could be very helpful. I also know that there's some folks in Massachusetts who have like UBI, like almost like more theory-based conversations. So they might be interested in like connecting there and offering some of their thoughts.
Awesome. Any other things from the Massachusetts team?
I guess yeah. So we had a very successful Rhode Island Yang Gang, and I know that's one of the targeted senators. So they had got together. They had only 2 weeks to gather something like, I don't know, like 3,000 or 4,000 signatures to get Yang on the ballot, and they, you know, just did this sprint and got it done. So I feel like that team was like very core, energized, excited. And so I think like kind of inviting them to come to one of those conversations next week and then be like, all right, do you want to do this July action? So kind of reaching out to those people. And then I think it sounds like Yenny's already thinking about activating Worcester and Western Mass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and then just personally for me, like I also want to reach out to like the other states where we have, you know, chapters that aren't, you know, haven't heard this conversation yet, that are kind of within those targeted senators. And I just know for Massachusetts in general, I think Melissa's pretty tapped out with the candidate support responsibilities. So as we reach out to that wider leadership team, trying to find someone who would be excited about potentially being the lead in the state for this, because I feel like Melissa's kind of like, we're already doing so much.
Yeah.
So it's like we need to recruit leadership directly just for this.
That sounds good. And just as a heads up, we've been working with Humanity Forward and Conrad in developing some events for our shared endorsed candidates. And so Robbie is one of those, and Morse we totally, you know, align with. We just haven't had a chance to go through our endorsement process with him. But one of the things that we're talking about are ways to help work with the campaigns directly to coordinate some of this stuff, especially the July stuff. And so hosting events for them, but also giving them opportunities to activate their supporters around some of these, some of the pressure campaigns, and even potentially some, you know, marches or public events as well. So, so there might be some stuff coming directly from the congressional candidates that can help make that happen as well. And so we're meeting next week to talk a little bit more about what July and August can look like, and you guys might get some additional support, or kind of
Yes.
support across all of it together.
Especially I'd say like Alex Morse, to what I can see is he's successfully run and got himself to be mayor of Holyoke. So his fundraising and organization is much tighter, whereas Robbie Goldstein is switching from being a medical doctor.
Yeah.
So he needs more of that infrastructure guidance and support, and, you know, but just who he is very special. He has really good numbers and can win. He has very strong progressive groups that have stepped behind him. He's very excited for the Yang Gang to basically bring potentially a more conservative Democrat in with him. And, but like the way he talks about, because he's been an infectious disease specialist at MGH, and he's also been the director of their transgender health program for about 6 or 7 years. Like he's been the primary care doctor for people in very vulnerable circumstances. So the way he speaks about healthcare and is really focused on that healthcare is so much bigger than meeting with your doctor, but it's, you know, having housing, it's having, you know, like he's really special and I think deserves the support and can win. Like he's got the numbers to win, but he's just has never run a political campaign before. So he needs some infrastructure help.
Yeah. I want to make sure we're already about 8 minutes over, so I want to just go through the remaining states real quick to see what jumped out in this conversation. And Yenny, did you have a last thing to add in?
Yeah, I just had I think that the issue that I'm seeing from the connection I have with the Worcester location is that they are completely on their own. He has no information from above him. And that's seriously concerning for me because that means
which Worcester?
Information. For the July 11th.
Got it. Okay.
He made a thing, like he's got McGovern's address and is planning this stuff, but he's on his own.
Okay.
So we need to make sure that more support is getting down to all of the locations, that information is getting down to them, because it doesn't seem like it is.
Okay. Thank you. Kentucky.
Yeah, this week we are massively reaching out to everybody in their DMs saying join us. So while we do that, we can definitely push like the July 11th march, or not march, but you know, we can get a handle with that. And I think we're also going to try and reach out to some places like the Sunrise Movement and try and get a handle with them to try and collaborate on some of these things.
Okay. I'm happy to make an introduction, Michael, if you want to follow up with me directly. I can make an introduction with their national candidate coordinator.
If I remember correctly, the Sunrise Movement is already, I think, bought in to the July 11th action. I think I remember them saying that in the meeting yesterday. Because I remember that name coming up and Googling it.
Cool.
So easy.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Michael. Texas, Massey?
Yep, so I've reached out to the Humanity Forward Texas chapter leads and trying to schedule a meeting with them this week. And hopefully that will allow us to quickly push out the July 11th action throughout it's a large state, throughout everything going on there. And then personally, to me, just knowing that we just had a poll coming up actually at one point ahead of Trump in the general elections. So the two most important things in my perspective is probably influence and convert candidates and DNC Biden pressure to adopt UBI. And so that's something I want to discuss in the meeting too, just because turning Texas blue, or at least very clearly purple, is an opportunity. Meaning that we need some defining factor that changes everyone, and I see UBI as being the sort of the tipping point.
So, cool. And then Oregon, Kelsey, do you want to just talk a little bit about what you're seeing as kind of priorities?
Yeah, for Oregon, I mean, definitely going to be participating in the July 11th event. And we'll be, I think, connecting with our revolution here, and I'm reaching out to just some of the people in the Yang Gang that are here. I know I am doing a lot of like the letter writing campaign stuff, and we'll be working on getting a new letter writing campaign, and then the UBI library, and there a whole bunch of other stuff. Basically, March, you know.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so we've gone over. I want to let everybody go. I think the most important, from our perspective, the most important thing moving forward is actually to have a weekly meeting that all of the organizations, leadership of organizations, can attend together. So this is people from Fund for Humanity, people from HFM, people from different states, Income Movement, and Humanity First Movement, and Humanity Forward. I might have missed one, but all the groups, all the organizations. I know right now, from our perspective, what we don't want to have happen is that everybody gets buried in meetings, because we know that it's very easy for that to happen. So having one meeting a week that everybody can join into, and where the latest and greatest information, we can be sharing some of those best practices. We can be sharing latest information on, as we're moving very quickly on things like July 11th, is going to be, I think, pretty critical. And making it so that we're not having to have separate conversations with each organization that we're associated with, I think, is the only way we're going to keep our sanity. So following up this, you know, in the email with all the other things that we've identified, a one-pager with the kind of tasks and the event, the 2 meetings this week, so that you guys can share those with your larger community. As well as a copy of this document that we went through, link to the notes, links to any, you know, bailoutthepeople.com and the Basic Income March, just kind of all in one nice little succinct place. We also are going to want to do a when to meet thing to everybody. So this is like probably going to go to like 50 or 60 people, but we want to try to find a place when a time when we can have at least one representative from each organization or each region, be able to regularly participate, maybe not every single week, but that where it feels like it's a good time, where there's a high likelihood chance of that happening, so that we can have very tactical and specific syncs like this, kind of a stand-up meeting to move as we move things forward, and so that we can hold each other accountable to the actions that we say we're going to take during the week. And then we can check in and see how that progress is going, and if there's things that you guys need in order to continue to do that work. So does that sound like a plan, like an acceptable kind of next step for people?
Yeah.
I'm going to take silence as agreement. Okay,
Yes.
so there's going to be a pretty big email that goes out this evening. So just keep your eye out on that, and that'll have the clear kind of next steps, the tasks that we've all kind of agreed to, and then we'll find a time that we can meet once a week with everybody to just continue this work, and hopefully just over time that grows and becomes more comprehensive with more organizations and more states represented, so that we can make sure that we're kind of prioritizing action. You know, this is like the volunteer action side of things, separate from all of the other organizational stuff that we all are in the midst of doing. But really looking forward to it. This was a great conversation. And I think from our perspective, really the most critical piece through this summer that we want to make sure we're providing the community is opportunities to take action. That action is really how, especially the Yang Gang historically has been most activated and engaged, is when they knew they had things that they could do that were going to have an impact, a direct impact on stuff that they cared about. And so we're going to just continue to feed actions to keep you guys fully aware of what those actions are, and as much as possible to help kind of coordinate those efforts and communication across the organizations. We'll also include in there, we have a weekly stand-up Income Movement does for all of our projects. So once these projects really kind of kick off and we're funneling volunteers to them, we have meetings for those projects, but then we have just a weekly stand-up where people can see the progress that's happening on all of the things, to understand how it's all working together, to celebrate together wins when we have them, and also to make people aware if there's something really critical and high priority that's coming up and we don't have enough bodies on it, we can do a call to action. if you haven't already signed up to be a volunteer with Income Movement, on our website, there's a page, a form to do that. All that does is get you, besides, obviously it'd be great to have you volunteer for us, but an important piece of that is you'll be getting all of our volunteer emails. So you'll see all the things that we're sending to our own community around actions. And if there's something urgent that there's been a shift in or something midweek between meetings, you would get that. So if you haven't already signed up and you want to be getting that kind of information around volunteer opportunities, actions, etc., signing up for that will mean that you're just kind of in the flow of information. And other than that, I think we're really excited to be working with you guys, really happy to have so many of you represented here, and we're looking forward to working together. So thanks so much, and definitely reach out individually if you guys have any questions or any issues come up as you socialize this out in the community. Thanks a lot, you guys. Take care.
All right.
Take care.
If we wanted to get a copy of this recording to share with some of the state leadership that weren't able to hop on at this time, can you make that available somehow?
Yeah, I can drop, we'll put it onto our YouTube channel, and then we'll drop a link in for you guys in the HFM leadership channel on your Slack. Does that work?
Yep.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. Have a great rest of your weekend, you guys. Thanks so much for giving so much time today. We really appreciate it.
Have a great day.
And Chelsea, thanks for coming to our meeting tonight to kind of do a
Chelsea
mini-
hopped off. Oh wait, no, Chelsea is still here.
Oh, I'm gonna talk to Yenny about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, those are the slides that will put you in as like coalition partner spotlight.
Oh, she hopped off already. I'm hopping on the phone with her anyway.
All right.
So.
Bye.
Thank you guys. Bye.